Okay, so this is Web Design Part 2. And by the way, you'll notice that the references seems like they're pretty old, 2002, 2000, but these concepts and the ideas are almost ageless and still applicable today. And so uh, we are using fundamental knowledge that Nielsen and his team came up with some time back ago. Good web design often goes unnoticed, but not bad design. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at a long list of design guidelines. And you'll find that many websites already use these guidelines. So it looks fine, right? And we don't have any complaints. But you find that when some of these guidelines are violated, it becomes pretty noticeable. Okay, let's start. The logo or the company name should be of reasonable size and normally is in the top left hand corner and should be in a noticeable location. And certainly, as I mentioned, top left hand corner is the typical location of the logo. And it doesn't have to be a huge logo, right? It has to be of a typical size, right? When we look at a number of websites examples, you know what the typical size of a logo is. And normally the website also has a tagline and should be brief, right? And some taglines are confusing, like like the Ford's old tagline, but some are a lot more descriptive of the company or of the website. And the tagline is what you see in the top part of the window, right? On the browser itself when the page is being viewed. We also want to emphasize the key aspects of the company as well as the main priority task of the company. So for instance, if the company is for searching stock prices, right, or the website is for searching stock prices, then that feature of being able to search for stock prices should be upfront since it's the main priority task. So if you look at other websites like eBay, for instance, buying and selling are main priority tasks, and you find that to look for products either through browsing product categories or using a search feature, these are main priority tasks and they're upfront on the homepage itself. And what you want to do is also to certainly to have one page as the official page, and that's typically called the home page. But most of the pages have a typical look and feel. Right? If you think about the La Trobe University website, each of the page on that site has a typical look and feel. Right? And you do know when you have exited or click on a link and got out of the La Trobe website, you do know, right? Because you have a different look and feel. Now, there are some links which are very typical in corporate websites. For instance, if you do a survey of 10 or 20 different company websites, they typically have this link called About Us, which links to a page containing information about the company. So it's very important for a company web page to have a link called About Us, because there's almost a link that the company website is expected to have. And there are some other links as well, but they are not as typical. And sometimes instead of About Us, the name of the label of the link is About and then the name of the company, About Ford, About Coles, and so on. Okay. Another typical link that you find on a corporate website is the Contact Us link, right? So you do a survey of 10, 20 different websites, of 10 to 20 different company websites. You're going to find this link called Contact or Contact Us. So again, when you design a web page, you should have the link About Us. You should have another link called Contact Us as well. And sometimes there's a link called Feedback, right? And sometimes Contact Us and Feedback are actually the same, right? containing information for the user to be able to provide feedback about the website. Privacy policy, sometimes there's a link on the web page to a privacy policy, especially if it is a website that collects information about the person. And normally there's a privacy policy that tells the user what the information collected is going to be used for or not used for. So those are just typical links. When designing links, you want links to be quite obvious, right? So when you look at a website, you don't want those links to be colored in such a way that you don't even know whether they are links until you move the mouse pointer over those elements on the web page. So you want links to really look like links, and they should be scannable. And so you should not have a link with a very long label, long textual label. Right? Links should be scannable and easily distinguishable from non-links, if you like. And click here, generally a link with the label click here is not to be encouraged, or even generic names like more and so on. Sometimes it's useful, but sometimes it's not very useful. If the label of the links are too general, it doesn't say too much about what the link is pointing to. Link colors are important, so you want the colors of links to be different enough so that they look like links. And at the same time, you also want to distinguish visited and non-visited links. Links that you haven't visited, links that you've visited, and you'll notice that on the browser that links that you've visited have a different color from links that you have not visited. And that's normally done by the browser itself by default. And again, you don't have to use the word links to indicate links on the page. Right? Obviously, it's a link. Right? It should be different enough. And if a link does anything, then go to another web page. For example, it links to a video or links to a large PDF file or a large Word file. It is good to say that explicitly in the label of the link itself or somewhere near the link to say that this is a link to something big, or even a link to something that takes a long time to download. Right? So you're thinking of the user. Right? Before the user clicks on the link, what does it lead to? Would it result in the user waiting 10 minutes for the thing to download? Right? And in the meantime, the user doesn't know what's happening. Right? So include something in the label of the link. If it's pointing to something big, think of the user. Navigation, certainly the horizontal navigation bar at the top, that's quite a typical layout. Sometimes it's at the side, a vertical horizontal bar. Depends how you design a website. Sometimes it's a little bit more creative than that. And you want to group items in the navigation area which are similar next to each other. So the idea of a bunch of items being next to each other implies that they are somehow related, right? So, or collected in some form. So you don't want to replicate links too many times, right? So you don't want to give two different navigation bars, for instance, each bar containing the same links, right? That could be confusing. And if you look at many e-commerce websites, if there's a shopping cart, for instance, if you look at Amazon, the shopping cart is clearly visible somewhere on the page itself, typically on the home page, and often in many of the other pages on the same site as well. Icons in navigation are helpful, but remember that icons are images, so they may take a bit longer to download. So you don't have to use icons if text links are good enough. And sometimes text links have labels which are text, and it could be more descriptive than the icons. And terminology is important. Right? The idea is that when you create the label of the link, you want to have instructive labels, right? Something that really describes what the link points to. Search, right? The search box typically has 25 characters, in a font size that most users use, right? So if you do a survey of a number of search features on different websites, they normally have that kind of a size, sometimes slightly bigger. And normally the button that is used is called go or search, right? So these are typical labels for buttons associated with a search box. Advanced searches are quite normal on a typical website nowadays, right? So when you type in a keyword, it will search through all the web pages on the site itself, right? So the idea is that you don't hide the search code from the users, right? So the typical behavior of a search feature is that it will search over all pages on the website. It doesn't just search certain pages. And certainly you don't need a searching the web feature on your own company website. People can just use Google, for instance. Shortcuts, often there are some websites will have shortcuts to high priority tasks. So you have a website that is used to perform certain tasks. There could be shortcuts to it, right? And for instance, it could come in the form of a drop-down menu with links to specific uh, pages within the website itself. Right? So the idea of these shortcuts is to reduce the number of clicks to do something. Right? Another very popular example is Amazon's one-click shopping feature, right, for instance. These are shortcuts. And you don't want to include tools unrelated to the tasks that users come to your site to do, right? For example, if it is a car sales website, you probably don't want to have weather forecasting in there. It will be confusing. And the browser already has back buttons, forward buttons. You don't want to replicate these functions on your website itself. And you can go to a number of web pages. This is just a very small example. You can, in fact, search for good web designs using Google or some other search engines, and you can see many examples. Okay, that's it for part 2.